Coming up, a battle as old as the universe itself, provided you subtract all of the days ending in Y. Aftermarket modifications versus factory warranty. That's next. I'm John Cadog from AutoExpert.com.au, the place where Australian new car buyers save thousands off their next new cars. Hit me up on the website for that. The following question is typical of a great many that flood my inbox. This one is from Michael Park. Now, I do not rate Michael as a nut, but he is a very enthusiastic proposed modifier of an upcoming new car purchase, which is something I generally recommend you never do. So let us deep dive into that incrementally. I'm about to upgrade to a Forester XT. Subaru have stopped making them for the moment. The current 2.5 Forester is a sluggish family SUV, and I like a touch of spirited driving now and then, even in a CVT. So I have seen your video on ECU remapping, and I'm going to wait out my warranty period before trying any of that. However, what performance enhancements can one implement on a new car without disturbing one's factory warranty? I'd suggest that on this topic, the most common mistake that people make is they assume their factory warranty is some kind of monolith, like an unused prop out of 2001: A Space Odyssey or something. It's not a stone tablet that the dealer gets to wreak havoc over with a Kango hammer or some such. So it's not a monolith, it's a contract between you and the manufacturer. And basically, the manufacturer is obliged to fix manufacturing defects or any other defects that render the vehicle not reasonably durable, at least under Australian consumer law. And then if you go out and do something to the vehicle, or a third party gets involved and has his or her way with the vehicle, then the manufacturer is really not obliged to pick up the tab there if something goes wrong. So you're in this sort of flexible sea where the warranty sort of pertains sometimes and maybe it doesn't at others when you get involved with modifying the vehicle from its original specification. So let's take a look at an actual example of this kind of thing that happened recently. This is a case that's had its day in court, so it's pretty safe to talk about. It concerns a Mitsubishi customer named Paul Knowles, who bought a brand new Triton in 2015. And then by the end of 2016, he kind of had a gut full of its performance and he sued them for $56,000. Now, that was the total of the purchase price of the vehicle, the interest on the finance, the cost of the aftermarket accessories, and the lost business. Now, I think for most of us, you, me, clearly Mr. Knowles, $56K is a lot of money. Maybe for Mitsubishi and maybe for a dealer, not so much. Anyway, they ended up in a big dispute because apparently Mr. Knowles had pimped this vehicle. He had given it the big off-road aftermarket sex up, and it had a bull bar on the front allegedly, and driving lights and fog lights and a light bar and all this stuff hanging off the front. It had bash plates fitted underneath, and it experienced multiple incidences of overheating. The turbocharger failed and the inlet manifold was damaged as well. Now, the first go at this, Mitsubishi replaced all of that stuff under warranty, and afterwards they pushed back. They claimed that the aftermarket modifications were a major contributor to the failure that he had experienced, and here is what Mitsubishi said in its official court submission. The plaintiff fitted aftermarket modifications to the vehicle which at no time were approved by Mitsubishi Motors Australia, as such modifications diverged from the vehicle's original engineering design and in particular had the effect of causing an extreme restriction in airflow to the vehicle's cooling system. The dealership here, Commonwealth Motors in the ACT, they once instructed Mr. Knowles to take all that crap off the front of his vehicle. Mr. Knowles declined, saying the vehicle would look quote unquote terrible if he did that, and then the failures just kept on happening. So he ended up in this position where he's in a three-way battle with him versus two defendants, where the only real winners here, I'm sure, were a bunch of lawyers. Here's some more from Mitsubishi's official submission. The second defendant, that would be Mitsubishi, is not liable to make any payment because the plaintiff has caused any loss or damage associated with the condition of the car by reason of fitting the aftermarket parts. The second defendant is not liable because the car has been damaged by the plaintiff for reasons not relating to the state or condition of the car as at the time of supply. I can certainly sympathise with both points of view here. I can see that Mr. Knowles is heavily invested in his vehicle for work and play, apparently, and it's not performing the way he had imagined, and obviously he's offside about that. Now, I can see Mitsubishi's point of view too, and the dealers, because they didn't authorise fitting all that stuff to the front. They didn't R&D it. And I can't say whether or not that stuff caused the failures, but I certainly can say that it has fueled this dispute. It has certainly put a wedge in between Mr. Knowles and a resolution from Mitsubishi and or the dealer. So there's that. And I don't think any of us, you, me, Mr. Knowles, probably not even the dealer or Mitsubishi, really want to be in that position. And this is the risk you shoulder when you go and modify a vehicle extensively. So a lot of the continuation of the warranty really does hinge on the extent of the modifications you do and the nature of the problems that you subsequently experience. So there's a range of different examples here, right? From the absurd to the extreme hardcore warranty violation. So for example, if you get your car windows tinted and then your transmission makes a loud noise and goes poopy in its trousers, it would be completely unreasonable for a manufacturer or a dealer to say, "Nah, mate, you've modified the car, we're not looking after you here." Because clearly the tinting cannot affect the transmission in any sort of meaningful way. I think we could all agree with that. On the other hand, however, you might go 100% performance nuts and fit the big injectors and an oversized turbo and an intercooler with its own postcode that you can see from the International Space Station, remap the ECU, spend 6 weeks running 12-second quarters or something, and then transmission, poopy, trousers, same thing. And all of a sudden, hey presto, we've got a problem. And I think we could all agree that it is completely unreasonable in that case for you to go back to the dealer or the manufacturer and say, "Hey, come on, you got to look after me here. I've spent the big bucks on your fine product and look at the transmission. How can you do this to me? I'm an ambassador. Don't you know who I am? Can I lower the suspension by about an inch or two? This would make the XT handle better. Add a better sway bar, better handling." Let's just ponder the absurdity of imagining the perfect car for you, the right car, yes, and then you are lying awake in bed at 3 o'clock in the morning or something, dreaming up a list longer than your arm of modifications that you will perform to make that car perfect. Then haven't you got to also ask yourself, is the car actually right for me as well? And is there not some other car out there that might be just absolutely perfect out of the blocks? Let me just see if I can wrap my brain around this. You want a wagon that's kind of the same size as a Forester, but you don't want it to be all roly-poly like an SUV. You want it to be trim and taut and sit down a little bit lower, but still give you that wagon versatility. Wouldn't it be lovely, therefore, if you could find a turbocharged all-wheel drive wagon that rode low and was nice and taut just out of the blocks and was, near as damn it, exactly the same size? Well, fortuitously, Subaru already has one of those in its inventory. It's called a Levorg. So instead of getting a Forester and trying to turn it into a Levorg by doing all of these one-off mods to make it so, why not just buy a Levorg? I'd suggest, that 2 inches is a serious old slam on the suspension, and although the wheels and tyres might fit, you have to wonder about all that stuff down there that could generate a problem down the track. For example, there's a lot of R&D that goes into the standard ride height of vehicles and the orientations of the drive shafts and the steering and all of that kind of thing. And then if you go and subtract 50 millimeters from the ride height, then all of those angles change. And I'll just give you one example of how that can be a serious problem. If you think about a drive shaft, okay, a drive shaft is just a thing that comes out of a diff. All right, it's a thing like that. Diff's over here. Drive shaft goes like that because, the wheel goes up and down and the diff is mounted to the body. So there's a whole bunch of articulation. And then there's articulation here too as the wheel moves up and down because there are two hinges, right? And what you've got to say to yourself is, let's think about the universal joint that might be just here, okay? Universal joints allow rotation to happen through some sort of angle because there's a shaft coming out of the diff like that and a drive shaft goes like that and it's still got a drive, and this one's turning like this and this one's turning like that, and there are degrees of separation literally in between them. And the problem with universal joints is that for every revolution of a universal joint, the angular speed of the shaft is not constant, and the degree of lack of constancy of that angular speed varies with the angle. So when the angle is great, there's a great deal of acceleration and deceleration of the angular speed of the output shaft per revolution. Okay, I hope that made sense. Anyway, that also means there's a great deal of mechanical wear that takes place. So when you change the ride height of a vehicle, you increase the angle through which those shafts might have to operate, certainly in extremis, in hard cornering or when that bump is detected or something. That's a bit of a problem because the wear rate can absolutely go through the roof. And then the drive shaft fails or the universal joint fails and you're halfway around a bend. That's a pretty interesting situation to be in. Even if nothing bad happens, you could be several hundred kilometres from home and that is still a problem. And this accelerated wear is a direct consequence of you doing that to that vehicle, and it is hardly the manufacturer's problem, even though to you it may seem as if it's an example of unreasonably early failure. Let's talk about one of my favourite things, which would be inspired by Uncle Darth there up on the wall, the dark side of doing this stuff. And there certainly is a dark side, okay? And here it is. You're going to stiffen up the suspension as well as lower it because there will be less suspension travel available now between normal ride height and hitting the bump stop, and you don't want to hit the bump stop all the time, so the springs will need to be stiffer. That makes sense. You'll also have a stiffer anti-roll bar to go with those stiffer springs. And when you tip the car into a bend at, I don't know, 7 out of 10 or something in the dry, that's going to feel a lot less roly-poly, more upright, more direct. And who doesn't want that? Answer: everybody who ever misjudges a bend in the wet. That's who. Because if you overcook it into a bend like that, what's going to happen is there's going to be much less warning and much less forgiveness between grip and slip. And if you are not an elite driver, that means there's not much warning between in control and out of control. And this is also, I guess, exacerbated by any other mods that you might make in addition to the suspension mods, because if you do that stuff, you're very likely to go down to your local wheel and tyre place and go and get yourself some bigger diameter and width tyres and wheels to go with them, right? And that's going to make the steering response even stiffer and more direct as well. And you might find yourself in that worst case scenario in the wet where there is no warning essentially between in control and out of control. And that's something that's been specifically engineered in by the manufacturer, okay, so that you know that you're getting close to the limit. And if you suddenly do these mods and engineer it out, all of a sudden you're going to get that response like in a supercar when it's like, I've got it, I've got it, I've got it. Woo-hoo! No, I haven't. And on a racetrack, that's not too bad. You might bend a few panels, but on a road, that's terrible because you can go onto the wrong side of the road. You can hit all of the things that are not there on a racetrack, like oncoming cars and power poles and trees and pedestrians and all of that unthinkable stuff. So there is absolutely a dark side to these modifications that you lie in bed awake at 3 o'clock in the morning dreaming of doing? Exhaust system upgrade, better performance and not just noise, turbo upgrade? Any suggestions for fuel economy upgrades? Let's just think about that, shall we, with Uncle Darth there keeping watch, reminding us that the dark side exists not only in the dynamic domain, but also down there, under the hood. If you do this stuff, okay, you bolt up a big exhaust and a big turbo, then the existing engine control software is really not going to understand what the hell is going on, because you'll be jamming more air in and more exhaust will be flowing out the blunt end, so you'll need a tweak to the ECU anyway, just so it can keep up. And then when you do that and you make all of those additional kilowatts and newton meters and the CVT goes poopy in its trousers, you have made this bed and you are going to have to lie in it, including listening to the giggles behind the hand in the service department should you front up in that distressed condition and mention the W word, which you should never do if you've done all that stuff, because hey, dignity is important in these challenging situations. Let's also think about performance on one hand, which you want more of, and economy on the other, which you say you also want more of. And the two are mutually exclusive, because when you tweak for performance, what you're basically doing is figuring out how to jam more air into your engine, bigger turbo, maybe some bigger injectors to go with that so you can pump in more fuel and make those more kilowatts and newton meters and flow more exhaust out the back. Whereas if you're engineering for economy, you do a completely different job. And this is exemplified in cars endlessly. You just have to get two good examples and park them side by side, like say, I don't know, a BMW M2 and a Toyota Prius. They're about the same size, and there the similarity ends. You could park them next to each other and introduce them to some aliens from Alpha Centauri, and even they would figure that out in short order, I think you'd find. The final issue with all of this is about compliance with emissions regulations. You've got to comply in an ongoing way, and the regulations and the focus on them is increasing. The penalties for non-compliance are also increasing. So do you really want to open the door to non-compliance there? And would you really like to do all of those mods and then get pulled over at the roadside, defected, have to prove that you've made the car standard and cop a filthy big fine as well? And take all the mods off, let's not forget that. So this is kind of the game of fire that you are playing with. Those matches and the petrol, you are literally doing that if you perform all of these mods, which is why it's such a fantastic idea to buy a car that performs as you need it to, absolutely standard, straight off the back of the production line. It would be great if you could do a video on new car upgrades that won't void your warranty. Please? Look, I know being a hypercritical asshole is a signature thing that I've got going on here, but don't get me wrong, it is absolutely okay to want to modify your car, and you know, it's okay to dream about this stuff, and sometimes it's even worthwhile as long as you understand the dark side and you kind of know what you're getting in for, because you don't have the R&D resources of a major car maker, so you kind of have to be a little bit conservative with it. But expecting to do this stuff and expecting the manufacturer to be okay about maintaining the warranty, it's kind of like expecting the wife to be okay with that informal arrangement you've got going on with the boss's secretary. The world just doesn't work that way. I'd suggest you should ask yourself, why are you doing this? Are you just aimlessly tinkering because, hey, it's fun? Or do you have a solid objective case for doing whatever to your car? And I guess aimless tinkering is okay, but you would want to subject that to a kind of automotive tinkerer's Hippocratic oath, which would be first, do no harm, because it really is no good. If you stiffen that suspension right up and bolt on those ultra low profile semi-grooved slicks or something, and then the first time it rains, you back the car off the road into the oncoming traffic at high speed. Nobody was expecting that, and yet all of society will have to contribute in some way to pick up the pieces. So that's bad. It's better, I think, if there is an objective case for doing this stuff, and it's easier to define in some contexts than others. If you've got a drag car, for example, and it's doing 14 second quarter miles and you want to do 12s, then there's an objective case there for bolting up the bigger turbo or the better grippy tyres, whatever. If you're running out of brakes at the end of the main straight, same thing. If you've got a problem with towing and the leveling's not right, you want to fit a load levelling hitch to your trailer to balance things up a little better, then I guess there's a case for that as well, subject to all the checks and balances that you need to do in all of these cases. But I guess the other thing to consider is if you're lying awake dreaming about these engine mods, is that really a cost-effective way to go? Because I'd have to say that in the context of performance modifications, for the overwhelming majority of vehicles, the system that is absolutely crying out to be upgraded before anything else, it's not engines, it's not diff ratios, it's not suspension, it's not even tyres, it's brakes. Because on a road car, the thing that is most compromised under pressure and the way to add better and better lap times to your driving equation is through better brakes, more durability of the brakes and you learning how to use them better. Because if you can brake later and wash off just the Goldilocks amount of speed, clip the apex at exactly the right speed every time and then get on the gas, that's the way to get faster. And you don't need to change the gearing or the grip or the engine output to do that. You just need to have brakes that will hang in there, and then you need to have the ability to make that happen every time, which is kind of critical too. I've been very fortunate to be able to discuss this topic with a couple of blokes I really respect, elite racing drivers Mark Webber and Jenson Button. On different occasions, I asked them the same questions about this stuff, and they both responded with exactly the same advice. And the advice is, look at it like this. A race car and a driver, your car and you in it, it's a system. It's a system for getting from A to B. In the context of racing, it's a system for getting around the track as quickly as physically possible. And the driver's job is to exploit the maximum performance available from the car at every point around the racetrack. That's what they do. They happen to do it at an elite level by running software that the rest of us cannot imagine and never would be able to run even if they could upload it. But hey, it's the same for you and me. And what strikes me as amazing is that of all the components in a car, the thing that we do is we lie awake in bed and we dream about upgrading this and upgrading that, getting that turbo, the ECU upgrade, slamming the car, whatever, getting those grooved slicks just to make us faster. And we're still, even currently without the mods, unable to milk every ounce of performance out of the car at every point at which we drive it. I'm not saying you should drive like that. I'm just saying when it comes to the ability to do that, most of us cannot. So the component that is most crying out for an upgrade is us. It's you, it's me, it's the nut hanging onto the wheel, right? And most of us don't dream about upgrading that. And the really cruel thing about this situation is it's the cheapest upgrade you'll ever do. It could save your life. You can take it with you from car to car, and it's not that hard. What it is training and application. You can practice it all the time, and then, only then, when you get to that situation where you can be the master in charge of the horse. You know, it's bad when the horse rides the jockey. It's much better when the jockey's in charge. And many people drive the car arse about with the horse in charge, and they go from near miss to near miss. If you get that upgrade, right? If you upgrade yourself, you'll never be in that position again. And then when you are in charge and you've got a particular car and all of a sudden you say to yourself, you know what, I could really benefit from more braking at the end of the straight, or I could really benefit from a bit more lateral grip here, then you won't just be having a faster version of a near miss. The upgrades will be part of an integrated system that you can really capitalise on. And hey, I bet you've never thought about it like that.